"We don't have kids," they said. But 30 years ago, they gave away a black baby girl because of her skin color. Now, they need a kidney to survive, and the doctor walking in is her. She looks them in the eye and says one word that makes them cry. "Where are you watching from today?" Let's begin. The beeping of hospital machines filled the otherwise silent room as Martha Winters clutched her husband Daniel's hand, her eyes fixed on the television screen mounted on the wall. The news reported a severe car accident on Highway 16, but Martha could barely process the information. After 3 days in the intensive care unit, the doctors had finally delivered their verdict: both she and Daniel needed kidney transplants, and soon. "What are the chances of finding 2 matching donors in time?" Daniel asked, his voice cracking with emotion. "Not impossible, but challenging," Dr. Peterson replied, adjusting her glasses. "Your blood types and tissue markers make you both difficult matches. We've placed you on the national donor list, but I want to be honest with you. The wait could be substantial." Martha closed her eyes, thinking about how quickly life could change. Just last week, they were celebrating their 35th wedding anniversary, and now they were facing their mortality together. The toxic chemical exposure from the factory fire near their neighborhood had damaged their kidneys beyond repair, and time was running out. "What about family members?" Dr. Peterson suggested. "Any children or siblings who might be willing to get tested?" Martha and Daniel exchanged a look that carried the weight of 3 decades of silence. "We never had children," Daniel said, the words feeling hollow in his mouth. But that wasn't entirely true. On the drive home, sitting in the passenger seat of their old Buick, Martha stared out the window at the changing autumn leaves. "Do you ever think about her?" she asked quietly. Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Every day of my life." 30 years ago, Martha had given birth to a baby girl, a beautiful child with deep brown skin, a stark contrast to Martha and Daniel's fair complexions. The whispers had started immediately in their small, predominantly white town of Millfield, the stares, the questions, the assumptions about Martha's fidelity. The truth was much more complicated. Martha had agreed to be a surrogate for her best friend, Yvette, a black woman who couldn't carry a pregnancy due to severe health issues. Using Yvette's egg and her husband James's sperm, Martha had carried their child, a precious gift for her friends. But 3 months before the birth, Yvette and James died in a terrible car accident, leaving no family behind to claim the baby. "We could have kept her," Martha whispered, the decades-old regret bubbling to the surface. "We should have kept her." Daniel pulled into their driveway, turning off the engine but making no move to get out of the car. "We were young and scared, Martha. Everyone in town was already talking. My parents threatened to disown me. Your job at the school was at risk. We weren't strong enough then." They had made the painful decision to give the baby up for adoption, hoping she would find a loving family that could provide her with the cultural connections and heritage they felt ill-equipped to offer. They had named her Hope before saying goodbye, a name that had become a prayer for them over the years. Back in their living room, surrounded by photos of their life together, vacations, holidays with friends, Daniel's retirement party from the fire department 5 years ago, Martha felt the emptiness of not having their daughter in those pictures. "Maybe it's time," she said finally, looking at Daniel. "Maybe it's time to try to find her." Daniel nodded slowly. "Where would we even begin?" Martha pulled out her laptop. The adoption was open initially. "We received a few updates during her first 5 years before the adoptive family moved away. Her name was changed to Kira Johnson. She'd be 30 now." As Martha typed the name into the search engine, Daniel sat beside her, his hand on her shoulder. What would we even say to her after all this time, he wondered aloud. "Hello, we're the people who gave you away, and now we need your kidneys." Martha gave him a sharp look. "That's not why we're doing this. We should have looked for her years ago, regardless of our health. She deserves to know her story if she wants to hear it." The search results loaded, showing several Kira Johnsons across the country. Martha clicked on images, scanning the faces, wondering if she would somehow recognize the baby they had held briefly 3 decades ago. And then she saw her. A news article from 2 years ago featured a photo of a beautiful young black woman with a bright smile and intelligent eyes. Dar. Kira Johnson, the headline read, "Pioneering nephrologist joins Cedar Ridge Medical Center." Martha's hand trembled as she pointed to the screen. "Daniel, look at her eyes. They're just like Yvette's." Daniel leaned closer, his breath catching. "And that smile, it's James through and through." They stared at the photo, mesmerized by this woman who had once been their daughter for a brief, precious time. This woman who had grown up to become a kidney specialist, of all things. "Cedar Ridge," Daniel said slowly. "That's less than 2 hours from here." Martha looked at her husband, hope and fear battling in her expression. "Do you think it's a sign?" Before Daniel could answer, his phone rang. It was Dr. Peterson from the hospital. Martha watched as her husband's face turned ashen. "I understand," he said quietly before hanging up. He turned to Martha, his eyes filling with tears. "My kidney function has dropped below 15%. If I don't get a transplant within the next month." Martha reached for his hand, completing the thought that hung in the air between them. Their time was running out faster than they'd anticipated. The decision to find their daughter had suddenly become much more urgent and much more complicated. As the autumn sun set outside their window, Martha and Daniel sat together in silence, staring at the face of the daughter they had given away, wondering if fate had brought her back into their lives just when they needed her most, and wondering if they had any right to disrupt her life after 30 years of absence. The phone rang again. This time, Martha answered. The voice on the other end was professional but warm. "Mrs. Winters, this is Cedar Ridge Medical Center calling. We'd like to inform you that your case has been assigned to our specialist team. Your primary physician will be Dr. Kira Johnson." The waiting room of Cedar Ridge Medical Center was busier than Martha expected for a Tuesday morning. She sat rigidly in an uncomfortable plastic chair, clutching Daniel's hand while pretending to read a magazine. Her heart pounded against her ribcage so forcefully she wondered if others could hear it. Martha Winters, a nurse in blue scrubs, called from the doorway. Martha stood, smoothing her carefully chosen navy dress. She had spent nearly an hour that morning deciding what to wear for this appointment, this meeting with the daughter she had carried for 9 months but barely knew. "Daniel, are you coming?" she whispered when her husband remained seated. He shook his head slightly. "I think it's better if you go in first. Too much at once might overwhelm her." "Overwhelm all of us." Martha nodded, understanding his hesitation. They had stayed up most of the night discussing how to approach this extraordinary situation. Should they reveal their connection immediately or wait? Would Kira even want to know who they were? The ethical complications were enormous, especially given their medical needs. Following the nurse down a sterile hallway, Martha rehearsed what she might say, though all her practiced words seemed to evaporate with each step. "Dr. Johnson will be with you shortly," the nurse said, leaving Martha alone in the examination room. Martha studied the diplomas and certifications on the wall: Harvard Medical School, residency at Johns Hopkins, fellowship at Mayo Clinic. Their daughter had excelled beyond anything they could have imagined. The door opened, and Martha's breath caught in her throat. Dr. Kira Johnson was even more striking in person than in photographs. Tall and poised, with her hair in neat braids pulled back from her face, she radiated confidence and compassion simultaneously. A wedding ring glinted on her finger as she extended her hand. "Mrs. Winters, I'm Dr. Johnson. It's nice to meet you." Martha took her hand, fighting back tears. This accomplished woman had once been the tiny baby she had held against her chest, singing lullabies while knowing she would soon say goodbye. "The pleasure is mine," Martha managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've reviewed your case file," Kira said, sitting down and opening a laptop. "Both you and your husband have significant kidney damage from chemical exposure. The prognosis without transplantation isn't favorable, but there are several options we can explore. Martha nodded mechanically, unable to focus on the medical details. All she could think was, she has Yvette's eyes. She speaks with James's thoughtful cadence. Mrs. Winters, are you following me? Kira asked, concern crossing her features. I'm sorry, Martha apologized. This is all overwhelming. Kira's expression softened. Of course it is. Facing kidney failure is frightening, but I want you to know you're in good hands. Our transplant program has excellent outcomes, and I personally oversee each case. How long have you been at Cedar Ridge? Martha asked, desperate to learn anything about this woman's life. If Kira found the question odd, she didn't show it. Almost 2 years now. I moved here from Boston with my husband, Michael. He's an architect. Do you have children? The question slipped out before Martha could stop herself. This time, Kira did look slightly surprised. Not yet, but we're hoping to start a family soon. She redirected the conversation. Now, about your treatment plan. I'm sorry for the personal questions, Martha interrupted. I feel like I've seen you somewhere before. Kira smiled politely. I give talks at local hospitals sometimes. Perhaps you've attended one. Perhaps, Martha murmured, knowing that wasn't it at all. The appointment continued with Kira explaining treatment options and next steps. She was thorough and patient, answering all of Martha's questions with clarity and compassion. I'd like to meet your husband, too, Kira said as the appointment concluded. Since you're both patients, it would be helpful to coordinate your care together. He's in the waiting room, Martha replied. He wasn't feeling well enough to join us initially. When Daniel was called in, Martha watched his face carefully as he met their daughter for the first time in 30 years. His eyes glistened with unshed tears as he shook Kira's hand. Mr. Winters, I'm Dr. Johnson. I'll be overseeing both your and your wife's care. Daniel could only nod, emotion robbing him of speech. As they left the appointment with follow-up tests scheduled and medication adjustments prescribed, Daniel leaned heavily on Martha's arm. She's remarkable, he whispered. Absolutely remarkable. We can't tell her yet, Martha decided. We need to understand her life better first and be certain of our own motivations. Back at home, they researched everything they could find about Kira Johnson online. She had been raised in Chicago by Theodore and Regina Johnson, both educators. She had excelled academically, earning scholarships throughout her educational journey. There were mentions of her community work in underserved areas and her research focusing on reducing disparities in transplant access for minority patients. She's had a good life, Daniel said, relief evident in his voice. The Johnsons seem like wonderful people. They gave her what we couldn't, Martha agreed, though the ache of what might have been still lingered. As the weeks passed, Martha and Daniel attended several more appointments with Kira. Though they maintained a professional relationship, Martha found herself sharing small personal details, her love of gardening, Daniel's career as a firefighter, hoping to create some connection, however tenuous. During their fourth appointment, Martha noticed a photo on Kira's desk that hadn't been there before, Kira with an older black couple, all three smiling broadly. Your parents? Martha asked, nodding toward the photo. Kira smiled. Yes, they came to visit last weekend. They're retired now and thinking of moving closer. You're very close to them? Daniel asked. They're amazing, Kira said, her face lighting up. They always made sure I understood my heritage and culture, and they were incredibly supportive when I decided to become a doctor. Martha and Daniel exchanged a glance, both thinking the same thing. The Johnsons had given Kira what they had feared they couldn't provide, a strong cultural identity and unconditional support. As the appointment concluded, Kira's expression grew serious. I've received both your latest test results. I'm afraid they show significant progression of kidney disease. We need to move you both higher on the transplant list and begin considering living donor options. She hesitated before continuing. I don't normally ask this of patients, but have you considered reaching out to extended family? Siblings, cousins, children, if you have any. The question hung in the air between them. Daniel cleared his throat. We never had children of our own. Kira nodded sympathetically. I understand. It's a difficult situation. I promise we'll explore every possible option. As they were preparing to leave, a nurse rushed in with an urgent message for Kira. Martha couldn't hear what was said, but she watched as Kira's professional demeanor cracked slightly, worry flashing across her face. I'm sorry, Kira said, turning back to them. I have a personal emergency. Dr. Patel will follow up with you about the next steps. After she left, Martha and Daniel lingered in the hallway, concerned by the sudden change in Kira's disposition. Something's wrong, Martha whispered. She looked upset. As they walked toward the elevator, they overheard two nurses talking. Dr. Johnson's father collapsed at their house, one said. Possible stroke. They've rushed him to emergency. Martha gripped Daniel's arm. Theodore Johnson, her adoptive father, is here in the hospital right now. This changes everything, Daniel said quietly. Martha nodded, but determination settled in her eyes. Yes, but maybe now is exactly when she needs to know she has more family than she realizes. As they stepped into the elevator, Martha's phone pinged with a text message from an unknown number. Mrs. Winters, this is Dr. Johnson's assistant. She asked me to inform you that your last blood test revealed something unusual she needs to discuss with you immediately. It's not about your kidneys. She'll call when she can. Martha showed the message to Daniel, her hands trembling. What could she have found? Daniel wondered aloud, his face paling. The elevator doors closed as Martha whispered, I think she might already know. The waiting room of the emergency department was chaotic, crying children, worried families, and the constant movement of medical staff. Martha and Daniel sat in a corner, feeling out of place yet unable to leave. They had debated whether to stay at the hospital after learning about Theodore Johnson's collapse, but ultimately decided they needed to be there for Kira, even if she didn't know why yet. We shouldn't be here, Daniel muttered, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. We're practically strangers to her. Martha squeezed his hand. I know, but what if she calls about that blood test while she's dealing with all this? We need to be available. The truth was more complicated than Martha would admit aloud. After 30 years of wondering and regret, she couldn't bear the thought of walking away from Kira again, not when she was facing a crisis. 3 hours passed. Daniel dozed intermittently while Martha watched the emergency room doors, jumping each time they opened. Finally, she spotted Kira emerging, looking exhausted, her professional composure replaced by the vulnerable expression of a worried daughter. Martha stood without thinking. Dr. Johnson. Kira blinked in surprise. Mrs. Winters, what are you doing here? We overheard about your father, Martha explained, suddenly feeling foolish. We were concerned. Daniel had awakened and joined Martha, standing awkwardly at her side. Something flickered in Kira's eyes, confusion, suspicion, or perhaps simple exhaustion. That's unusually kind of you. How is he? Daniel asked gently. Kira ran a hand over her face. Stable. It wasn't a stroke, thankfully, severe dehydration and exhaustion. He's been pushing himself too hard, helping my mother pack their house for the move. That's a relief, Martha said sincerely. An uncomfortable silence settled between them until Kira finally spoke. I'm sorry about having to leave our appointment so abruptly. My assistant mentioned she texted you. Martha nodded. Yes, something about unusual blood test results. Kira hesitated, glancing around the busy waiting room. This isn't the place to discuss it. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning, both of you? Of course, Daniel answered. Is it serious? It's not directly related to your kidney function, Kira assured them. But it is something we need to discuss privately. After arranging a time, they parted ways, with Kira returning to her father's room and Martha and Daniel heading home, the weight of uncertainty heavy between them. "She knows," Martha said as Daniel drove through the darkening evening. "She must have run some kind of genetic test." "Many medical tests can reveal genetic information these days," Daniel agreed. "But if she knows, why not say something immediately?" "Maybe she's processing it herself," Martha suggested. "Or maybe she wants to be absolutely certain before bringing it up." They spent a restless night, both imagining various scenarios for the upcoming meeting. By morning, Martha had rehearsed a dozen different explanations, apologies, and questions, none of which seemed adequate for the situation they faced. At the hospital, they were directed to Kira's office rather than an examination room. The change in setting suggested a different kind of conversation, less clinical, more personal. Kira greeted them with professional courtesy, though Martha detected tension in her posture. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice carefully controlled. "As I mentioned, I found something unusual in your blood work, Mrs. Winters." Martha nodded, her throat too dry to speak. "When we analyze blood for transplant compatibility, we look at various markers, including genetic factors," Kira continued. "Your blood sample displayed a rare genetic variant that caught my attention because I've only seen it once before." She paused, her eyes fixed on Martha. "In my own genetic profile." The office fell silent. Martha felt Daniel's hand find hers. "This particular variant is extremely uncommon," Kira continued, her clinical tone belied by the slight tremor in her voice. "The statistical probability of two unrelated individuals sharing it is less than 1 in several million, which led me to run additional comparative analyses." She finally sat down, placing a folder on the desk between them. "Based on these results, we share multiple genetic markers that strongly suggest a biological relationship." Martha couldn't hold back any longer. "You're our daughter," she whispered, "but not in the way you might think." For the next 30 minutes, Martha and Daniel took turns explaining the extraordinary circumstances of Kira's birth, how Martha had been a surrogate for her best friends, Yvette and James, their tragic deaths, and the painful decision to give Kira up for adoption. "We were young and frightened," Daniel explained, his voice thick with emotion. "In our small town, a white couple raising a black child in the early 90s, we faced so much judgment already just during the pregnancy. We thought you deserved parents who could help you connect with your cultural heritage," Martha added. "Parents who wouldn't have to explain racist comments from neighbors or family members." Kira had listened in complete silence, her expression unreadable. When they finished, she opened the folder and pushed a document across the desk. "This is my original birth certificate," she said flatly. "The one before my adoption. It lists Martha Winters as my birth mother and father unknown." Martha flinched. "That's not right. Your biological parents were Yvette and James Robinson. I was just the surrogate." "There's no record of any surrogacy agreement," Kira said, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. "Legally, you were my mother. It wasn't a formal arrangement through an agency," Daniel explained. "Yvette and James were our best friends. It was a private agreement between friends." Kira stood abruptly, walking to the window. "Do you have any idea how this feels? To discover at 30 that everything you thought you knew about your origins is wrong?" "We never intended," Martha began. "And now you both need kidney transplants," Kira interrupted, turning to face them. "Quite a coincidence that you'd search for me right when you need a compatible donor." The accusation hung in the air, sharp and painful. "We didn't know you were at this hospital," Daniel said quietly. "We were assigned to your care by chance." "Really?" Kira's voice was skeptical. "In a country with thousands of nephrologists, I'm supposed to believe it's coincidence that you ended up with me as your doctor." Martha felt tears welling in her eyes. "We only learned you were here after we were referred to Cedar Ridge. We recognized your name and picture from a news article. And you didn't think to request a different doctor or disclose our relationship immediately?" That's a serious ethical breach. We were wrong, Martha admitted. We should have been honest from the start. But please believe me, we didn't seek you out because of our medical condition. Kira took a deep breath, visibly struggling to maintain her composure. I need to process this, and I need to recuse myself from your care immediately. We understand, Daniel said. I'll transfer your cases to Dr. Patel, Kira continued, her voice becoming clinical again. He's excellent and fully capable of managing your treatment. As she gathered papers from her desk, her movements suddenly stilled. Did my parents know? My real parents, the Robinsons? Martha swallowed hard. Yvette and James died in a car accident before you were born. They were so excited to meet you. They had the nursery ready. James had built a crib himself. Something in Kira's expression shifted, a flash of grief for parents she never knew. I have pictures, Martha said softly, and letters Yvette wrote to you during the pregnancy. We've kept them all these years. Kira nodded almost imperceptibly. I should get back to my father. He's being discharged this afternoon. As they prepared to leave, Martha reached for her purse and withdrew a small, worn envelope. This has our contact information. And this was Yvette's. She wanted you to have it someday. Kira took the envelope without opening it, her fingers closing around a delicate gold locket. I'm not making any promises, she said, her voice controlled but not unkind. I need time. We understand, Daniel replied. Take all the time you need. As they walked to the parking lot, Martha felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. Do you think she'll ever want to know us? She asked. Daniel shook his head slowly. I don't know, but at least she knows the truth now. That evening, as Martha was preparing dinner, her phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. The locket won't open. Was it damaged? Martha's hands trembled as she typed back. There's a tiny button on the bottom edge. 3 minutes passed before another message appeared. Are these my biological parents? The couple in the photo. Yes, Martha replied. Yvette and James on their wedding day. This time, the response took nearly 20 minutes to arrive. My adoptive father's condition has worsened. He's been readmitted. Tests show kidney failure, acute, came on suddenly. They're talking about immediate dialysis. I can't believe this is happening. Martha stared at the message in disbelief, her heart racing as she called out to Daniel. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of timing, or perhaps purpose. Now, Kira faced not just the emotional upheaval of discovering her birth story, but also the imminent health crisis of the man who had raised her. The parallels were too striking to ignore: 3 people with kidney failure, connected by blood and circumstance across decades of separation. As Martha showed Daniel the messages, another text appeared: I need to ask you something important. Can you come to the hospital tomorrow morning? The hospital cafeteria was nearly empty at 7:30 in the morning. Martha and Daniel sat at a corner table, coffee cooling before them as they waited for Kira. They had barely slept, wondering what she wanted to discuss and whether it related to her father's condition, their own health crisis, or the complex family connection they now shared. There she is, Daniel murmured, nodding toward the entrance. Kira approached their table, looking exhausted. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her usual crisp appearance had given way to rumpled scrubs and a hastily tied ponytail. She'd clearly been at the hospital all night. Thank you for coming, she said, sliding into a chair. She clutched a paper cup of coffee like a lifeline. How's your father? Martha asked gently. Kira's professional facade crumbled slightly. Not good. His kidney function is deteriorating rapidly. The doctors are puzzled by the sudden onset. He had no previous indicators of kidney disease. I'm so sorry, Daniel said sincerely. Kira nodded, then straightened her shoulders, visibly pulling herself together. I've been researching all night. The genetic variant I discovered in your blood work, Mrs. Winters, the one that connected us, it's actually relevant to our current situation. Martha and Daniel exchanged confused glances. The variant is linked to a particular type of immune response that affects kidney tissue, Kira explained, her voice taking on the measured cadence she used during medical consultations. It's extremely rare, but when activated by certain environmental triggers, it can cause accelerated kidney damage. Like the chemical exposure from the factory fire? Daniel asked. Exactly, Kira confirmed. And potentially whatever has affected my father. I checked his medical records and found he volunteered with a cleanup crew after a chemical spill near their new house in Chicago 6 months ago. Martha leaned forward. You think the same genetic vulnerability that's affecting us is hurting your father? It's my working theory. Adopted children often share genetic health risks with their biological parents, but in this case, Kira paused, seeming to struggle with the complicated reality. In this case, I'm not biologically related to you, Mrs. Winters. You were the surrogate. That's right, Martha said carefully. But if your best friends, the Robinsons, were my biological parents, did they have any history of kidney disease? Martha and Daniel looked at each other, realization dawning. James had a brother with kidney problems, Daniel said slowly. He died young, before medical testing was as advanced as it is now. James was always careful about his health because of it, Martha added. He avoided certain medications that could stress the kidneys. Yvette used to tease him about how much water he drank every day. Kira nodded, her expression both sad and determined. That makes sense. This variant often runs in families with histories of unexplained kidney issues. But how does this connect to your adoptive father? Daniel asked, confusion evident in his voice. Kira took a deep breath. That's what I need to talk to you about. It's complicated. She pulled out her phone and showed them a photo, a much younger Theodore Johnson standing beside another man, both wearing military uniforms. This is my dad with his brother, my Uncle Charles, during their service, Kira explained. Uncle Charles died 15 years ago from kidney failure. Martha studied the photo, then looked up in shock. Your Uncle Charles was black, but your adoptive father isn't. Kira finished for her. Theodore Johnson is white. My mother, Regina, is black. They never hid the fact that they adopted me, but they also never told me the full story. She put her phone away, her movements deliberate. After you gave me that locket, I confronted my parents last night. I needed answers. What did they tell you? Martha asked softly. The truth, finally, Kira said, her voice tight with emotion. My adoptive mother, Regina, was Yvette Robinson's cousin. They weren't close as adults, but they knew each other. When Yvette and James died, news eventually reached Regina. Daniel's eyes widened. So, your adoption wasn't random? No, Kira confirmed. Regina and Theodore had been trying to have children for years without success. When Regina learned about me, a baby who had lost her parents, being carried by a surrogate who felt unable to raise me, she convinced Theodore they should adopt me. They knew who we were. Martha whispered, her hands trembling around her coffee cup. They knew our names. Yes, but they never reached out because the adoption agency advised them that clean breaks were best, Kira said, her voice carrying a hint of accusation. They honored your request for an open adoption by sending updates for the first 5 years, but you never responded. Martha felt tears welling in her eyes. We received the updates and treasured every one. We wanted to respond, but our lawyer advised against it. He said it would be confusing for everyone if we maintained contact. We regretted listening to him almost immediately, Daniel added. But by the time we worked up the courage to reach out, you had moved, and the agency said they couldn't forward communications without your parents' consent. Kira absorbed this information silently. Martha could almost see her re-evaluating 30 years of history. Here's where things get medically relevant, Kira finally continued. Uncle Charles, my dad's brother, married a woman named Diane who had the same genetic variant we're discussing. It runs strongly in black families with West African ancestry, like the Robinsons and like my adoptive mother's family. So, your Uncle Charles wasn't affected by the variant himself? Daniel asked, trying to follow. No, but his wife was, and now we know my biological father, James, carried it, too, Kira said, her clinical tone unable to mask her emotional struggle with these tangled family connections. The concerning part is that my father, Theodore, was exposed to the same chemicals that affected Uncle Charles's wife years ago, and now he's showing similar symptoms. Martha leaned forward. What does this mean for treatment? For the first time since they'd met her, Kira looked uncertain. Standard protocols aren't working well for any of you. My father, like both of you, needs a kidney transplant, but finding 3 matching donors with compatible blood types is nearly impossible. What about you? Daniel asked carefully. Could you be a donor for your father? I'm not compatible with him, Kira said, shaking her head. And ethically, I can't be tested as a donor for either of you while maintaining my role as a physician. Martha sensed there was more. Kira, what aren't you telling us? Kira's professional composure finally cracked completely. I'm pregnant, she whispered. 8 weeks. My husband and I have been trying for over a year. The timing is, she gestured helplessly. Oh, Kira, Martha said, reaching across the table instinctively, stopping just short of taking the younger woman's hand. That's wonderful news. It should be, Kira agreed, a mix of joy and worry crossing her face. But now I'm concerned about passing on this genetic variant to my child, especially with the family medical history on all sides. The three sat in silence for a moment, each processing the complicated web of genetics, family, and timing that had brought them to this moment. There's one more thing, Kira finally said. Something my mother revealed last night that changes everything. Martha and Daniel waited, tension building. My mother kept a box of Yvette's belongings, things that were meant to be given to me someday. Last night, she finally showed me. Kira pulled a folded paper from her pocket. This is a letter Yvette wrote to her unborn child, to me, a week before she died. Martha recognized the stationery immediately, pale blue with tiny flowers along the border. Yvette had written all her important letters on it. The letter mentions that James wasn't my biological father, Kira said, her voice barely audible. Yvette had a brief relationship with someone else before reconciling with James. He knew and accepted me as his own, but biologically. Who? Daniel asked, though something in his expression suggested he already knew the answer. Kira looked directly at him. You, Mr. Winters. According to this letter, you're my biological father. Martha's hand flew to her mouth as Daniel went completely still. That's not possible, he finally managed. Yvette and I never. The letter is very specific, Kira interrupted, her voice stronger now. And it explains why my mother, Regina, was so determined to adopt me specifically. She knew the whole story from Yvette. I don't understand, Martha whispered, looking between her husband and Kira. Before he could respond, Kira's phone buzzed with an urgent message. Her face paled as she read it. It's my father, she said, standing abruptly. His condition has worsened. They're moving him to the ICU. As she hurried away, she paused momentarily. I need to be with my family right now, but this conversation isn't over. Meet me in my office tomorrow at noon. She fixed Daniel with an unreadable expression. And Mr. Winters, bring a DNA sample. I'm running a test to confirm what my mother and this letter are claiming. After she left, Martha turned to Daniel, her eyes filled with questions he couldn't answer. Is it possible? She asked, her voice trembling. Daniel stared at his hands. I don't know, he whispered. I honestly don't know. In the 30 years of their marriage, Martha had never felt a distance open between them like the chasm that appeared in that moment, a gulf filled with unspoken secrets and questions that threatened everything they had built together. The drive home from the hospital was silent, a heavy tension filling the car. Martha stared out the window, her mind racing with unanswered questions. Beside her, Daniel gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Neither seemed able to speak first to bridge the sudden gulf between them. When they finally arrived home, Martha walked straight to their bedroom closet and pulled down an old shoebox from the top shelf. She placed it on the bed and removed the lid, revealing dozens of letters tied with blue ribbon, a few baby items, and several photographs. "You kept everything," Daniel observed from the doorway. "Of course I did," Martha replied, her voice tight. "She was ours. I carried her for 9 months, Daniel. She might not have been mine biologically, but I felt every kick, every hiccup." She looked up at her husband, her eyes filled with hurt and confusion. "But now I need you to tell me the truth. Was she yours biologically? Did you and Yvette?" Daniel sat heavily on the edge of the bed, shoulders slumped. "I don't know, Martha. I honestly don't know." "How can you not know?" Martha's voice rose. "Either you slept with my best friend or you didn't." Daniel ran his hands over his face. "It was before we were married, before you and I were even serious. Yvette and James had broken up briefly, and she and it happened once. Just once." Martha stood perfectly still, absorbing this revelation. "And you never thought to mention this when she asked me to be her surrogate?" "It was years earlier. She and James had been married for 3 years by then. I assumed," he looked up, his expression pained. "I assumed the timing made it impossible. And James knew about that night. If he thought there was any possibility the baby was mine, he would have said something." Martha sank onto the bed beside him, the letters scattered between them. "All these years," she whispered. "All the times we talked about Kira, wondered about her, and you never once mentioned this." "I didn't think it mattered," Daniel said. "And I was ashamed. I didn't want you to think less of me or of Yvette." Martha touched one of the photos, Yvette laughing at a picnic, her hand resting protectively on her pregnant belly. Martha had taken that picture herself. "Do you think it's true?" she finally asked. "Could Kira really be your biological daughter?" Daniel stared at his hands. "I'm going to find out tomorrow. If the test confirms it," he trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Martha gathered the letters and photographs, carefully returning them to the box. "Whatever the results, Kira has 3 people in kidney failure connected to her, you, me, and the father who raised her. That can't be a coincidence." "No," Daniel agreed. "It can't." That night, they slept on opposite sides of the bed, the space between them filled with 30 years of unspoken truths. Morning came too quickly. Martha awoke to find Daniel already up, standing by the bedroom window with his phone in hand. "Kira texted," he said without turning around. "Her father's condition has stabilized, but he's still critical. She wants us to meet at the lab instead of her office. They're going to expedite the DNA test." At the hospital, they found Kira in the genetics lab, her clinical detachment firmly in place despite the emotional chaos of the previous day. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying or lack of sleep, probably both, but her voice was steady as she explained the testing process. "We already have my DNA profile on file for research purposes," she explained as a technician prepared to take a cheek swab from Daniel. "This will give us confirmation within hours rather than days." "Have you told your husband about all this?" Martha asked gently. A flash of vulnerability crossed Kira's face. "Michael knows about my adoption and about meeting you. He doesn't know about the possibility that Mr. Winters might be my biological father or about the pregnancy." "Kira," Martha said softly, "you can't keep something like that from him." "I know," Kira acknowledged. "But I wanted to be certain before I added more complications to our lives. The pregnancy is already high risk because of my age. After the technician left with Daniel's sample, the three of them moved to a small consultation room. While we wait for those results, Kira said, pulling out a folder, there's something else we need to discuss. I've been reviewing all 3 kidney failure cases, and I've identified a potential treatment approach. She spread several medical charts on the table. The genetic variant we share affects how the immune system interacts with kidney tissue. Traditional transplantation has a high risk of rejection because of this. But there's an experimental protocol that's showing promise. Martha leaned forward. What kind of protocol? It involves a partial transplant combined with stem cell therapy, Kira explained. Instead of replacing the entire kidney, we transplant specific cellular structures that can regenerate damaged tissue while suppressing the immune response that causes rejection. And this would work for all 3 of us? Daniel asked. Kira nodded. Potentially. The catch is that it requires a donor with specific genetic markers that match the variant we're dealing with. Martha understood immediately. You're talking about yourself? Yes, Kira confirmed. I carry the variant but haven't been exposed to the environmental triggers that activated it in all of you. My tissue could provide the necessary cellular material for all 3 patients. Absolutely not, Daniel said firmly. You're pregnant. Any medical procedure would put you and your baby at risk. The protocol can be modified to use blood and bone marrow samples rather than kidney tissue, Kira countered. The risk would be minimal. But still a risk, Martha insisted. We can't ask that of you. You're not asking. I'm offering, Kira said, her expression softening slightly. Whatever the DNA test reveals, whatever our biological connection might be, the fact remains that all 3 of you need help. As a doctor, I took an oath to do no harm. Doing nothing when I could help would violate that oath. Before either Martha or Daniel could respond, there was a knock at the door. A young doctor entered, looking uncomfortable at interrupting. Dr. Johnson, your father is asking for you. His vital signs are fluctuating again. Kira stood immediately. I need to go. The DNA results should be ready in about 2 hours. I'll have them sent down. As she hurried from the room, Martha and Daniel were left alone with the weight of what she had proposed. She can't do this, Martha said. Not while she's pregnant. Not for virtual strangers. We're not strangers, Daniel replied quietly. Whatever the test shows, we're connected to her. They spent the next hour in the hospital cafeteria, neither eating much of the sandwiches they'd purchased. Martha kept checking her watch, counting down to when the DNA results would be available. What will this mean for us? She finally asked, her voice barely audible. Daniel reached across the table, taking her hand. I don't know. But whatever happens, whatever the results say, I love you, Martha. That has never changed in 30 years. Martha squeezed his hand but didn't respond. Some revelations were too fresh for easy forgiveness. When they returned to the consultation room, they found an envelope waiting for them. Inside was a single sheet of paper with the genetic test results. Daniel stared at it for a long moment before reading it aloud. Probability of paternity, 99.98%. Martha closed her eyes, absorbing the confirmation of what Ivette's letter had claimed. Daniel was Kira's biological father. What now? She whispered. Before Daniel could answer, the door opened, and a harried-looking nurse appeared. Mr. and Mrs. Winters, Dr. Johnson asked me to find you. There's been a complication with her father. She needs you upstairs immediately. They followed the nurse to the ICU, where they found Kira standing outside her father's room, speaking intensely with several doctors. When she saw them, she broke away from the conversation and approached. The experimental protocol we discussed, she said without preamble, her voice tight with urgency. My father's condition has deteriorated significantly. We need to implement it now, or he won't survive the night. You can't be serious, Martha said. You haven't even told your husband about your pregnancy yet. I don't have time for perfect solutions, Kira replied, her professional composure cracking. My father is dying. Then use me, Daniel said suddenly. I saw the results. I'm your biological father. Whatever genetic material you need, take it from me. Kira shook her head. It doesn't work that way. The variant expresses differently in males and females, and you're already affected by kidney failure. Your cells wouldn't help. Martha watched the desperation in Kira's eyes, the same expression she'd seen in Daniel's when he looked at their daughter for the first time 3 decades ago. In that moment, she made a decision. What if there's another option? Martha said. What if there's someone else who carries the variant but hasn't been affected by environmental triggers? Kira looked at her in confusion. Who? Martha took a deep breath. Your half-sister. Daniel and I had a daughter 12 years after you were born. She's a freshman in college now. Daniel stared at her in shock. Emily. But she doesn't have the variant. She's been tested for kidney issues all her life because of my family history. She's healthy. She was tested for standard kidney disease markers, Martha said quietly. Not for this specific rare variant. And she's never been exposed to the chemicals that triggered the condition in all of you. Kira's expression changed from confusion to realization. You think Emily might be compatible? I don't know, Martha admitted. But she might be our best hope. As the implications of this possibility sank in, Kira's phone rang. She answered it, her face paling as she listened. Yes, I understand. I'll be right there. She hung up, her hand trembling. It's my father. He's gone into full renal failure. We're out of time. Martha pulled out her phone. I'm calling Emily right now. As she dialed, Daniel stepped closer to Kira. There's something else you should know, he said, his voice breaking. Something I just realized from the test results. Kira looked at him, waiting. If I'm your biological father and Yvette was your biological mother, Daniel said slowly, then Martha isn't related to you at all. She was just your surrogate. I know, Kira replied. Then why are you and Martha both showing the same rare genetic variant, the one that's causing the kidney problems? Kira's eyes widened as she processed the question and its implications. That's not possible unless Martha and Yvette were related. Daniel finished for her. Sisters, maybe, or cousins who didn't know they were family. Martha lowered her phone, having heard the exchange. That's impossible, she whispered. Yvette was my best friend since childhood. We grew up together. We would have known if we were related. Would you? Kira asked, her scientific mind already racing ahead. Was either of you adopted or had family members you didn't know about? Before Martha could answer, the hospital intercom crackled to life. Code Blue, ICU Room 412. Code Blue, ICU Room 412. It was Theodore Johnson's room. As Kira sprinted toward her father's room, Martha and Daniel followed, the unresolved question hanging between them, a mystery that might hold the key to saving not just Kira's father, but all of them. The rhythmic beeping of medical equipment punctuated the tense silence in Theodore Johnson's hospital room. The code team had managed to stabilize him, but his condition remained critical. Kira stood by his bedside, one hand gripping her father's while the other rested unconsciously on her abdomen, a protective gesture for the life growing within her. Outside in the hallway, Martha paced while making urgent phone calls. Daniel sat in a chair nearby, his face drawn with exhaustion and worry. Emily's on her way, Martha announced, ending her final call. She's driving down from college now. Should be here in about 3 hours. Daniel nodded. Did you tell her everything? As much as I could explain over the phone, Martha replied. That her father is sick, that we found her half-sister, and that she might be able to help save 3 lives. How did she take it? Martha's expression softened slightly. She was shocked, of course. But you know Emily. She immediately asked what she could do to help. Their conversation was interrupted as Kira emerged from her father's room, accompanied by Dr. Patel, who had taken over Martha and Daniel's care. "We've stabilized him for now," Kira reported, her clinical demeanor barely masking her emotional exhaustion. "But his kidney function is at less than 10%. Without intervention in the next 24 hours, she didn't need to finish the sentence. They all understood the gravity of the situation. "I've been reviewing the experimental protocol," Dr. Patel said. "It's promising, but risky, and as Dr. Johnson mentioned, it requires specific genetic compatibility." "My daughter Emily is on her way," Martha told him. "She may carry the same genetic variant. We should prepare to test her immediately upon arrival." Dr. Patel nodded. "But in the meantime, there's another matter we need to discuss." He looked at Kira, who nodded for him to continue. The genetic results raised questions about familial relationships, specifically the presence of the same rare variant in both Dr. Johnson and Mrs. Winters despite the absence of a known biological connection. Martha slumped into a chair beside Daniel. "I keep thinking about it, but it doesn't make sense. Yvette and I grew up together in the same small town. Our families knew each other. How could we be related without knowing it? Were either of you adopted?" Kira asked, voicing the question that had been interrupted earlier. Martha shook her head. "No, at least I don't think so. I look just like my mother." "What about Yvette?" Daniel prompted gently. Martha hesitated. "She was raised by her grandmother. Her mother died when she was very young, and her father wasn't in the picture." Kira exchanged a glance with Dr. Patel. "That could be significant. Do you know anything about Yvette's father?" "Not much," Martha admitted. "It was a sensitive subject. Her grandmother never wanted to talk about him." Kira sat down across from Martha, her expression suddenly intense. "Mrs. Winters, I need to ask you something personal. Was your father always present in your life?" Martha blinked, surprised by the question. "Yes, until he passed away when I was in college." "Why?" Instead of answering directly, Kira pulled out her phone and showed Martha a photo, the picture from the locket showing Yvette and James on their wedding day. "Look at Yvette closely," Kira instructed. "Not just her features, but her expressions, the way she holds herself." Martha studied the familiar image, a photo she had cherished for decades. "What am I looking for?" "Now look at this," Kira said, swiping to a different photo, an old black and white image of a young couple. "This is from my adoptive mom's family album, her aunt and uncle at their engagement party in 1962. Martha leaned closer, then froze. "That woman, she looks exactly like Yvette's grandmother." "My mom says it's her Aunt Dorothea," Kira explained, who moved away from Chicago to a small town in Millfield. Martha whispered, "Yvette's grandmother's name was Dorotha." Daniel looked between them, understanding dawning on his face. "Are you suggesting Yvette and Martha were cousins? That they had the same extended family?" "It's a possibility," Dr. Patel acknowledged. "One that would explain the shared genetic variant." Martha sat back, overwhelmed. "But how would we not know this? Why would our families keep it secret?" "Sometimes families have complicated histories," Kira said quietly, her professional detachment softening, especially across racial lines in previous generations. Martha's hand flew to her mouth. "My father traveled a lot for work when he was younger, before he met my mother. He spent time in Chicago in the early 1960s. The implication hung in the air, unspoken but understood by all. If Martha's father had a relationship with someone in Yvette's family, perhaps even Yvette's mother, it would explain the shared genetic connection." Before they could discuss it further, a nurse rushed in. "Dr. Johnson, your father's blood pressure is dropping again." Kira immediately stood. "We can't wait for Emily. We need to implement the protocol now." "Using what donor material?" Dr. Patel asked. Kira squared her shoulders. Mine. Absolutely not, Martha protested. You're pregnant. The modified protocol uses only blood components and bone marrow, Kira countered. The risk to my pregnancy is minimal, but not zero. It's still a risk, Daniel insisted. It's my decision, Kira said firmly. As a doctor and as a daughter. Dr. Patel looked uncomfortable. Even the modified protocol has never been tested on a pregnant woman. Then I'll be the first, Kira replied. We don't have time to debate this. As they argued, the elevator doors at the end of the hallway opened, and a young woman with auburn hair hurried toward them. Mom. Dad. Emily Winters called, her face anxious. Martha rushed to embrace her daughter. Emily, how did you get here so fast? I was already on my way to surprise you this weekend, Emily explained. I was only an hour away when you called. She looked past her mother to where Kira stood. Is that my sister? Daniel confirmed, Dr. Kira Johnson. The two women regarded each other with open curiosity. Despite their different racial backgrounds, there was something unmistakably similar in their expressions, in the determined set of their jaws. You must be Emily, Kira said, extending her hand. Thank you for coming. Emily took Kira's hand but didn't shake it, she held it, a gesture of immediate connection. I understand you need my help. Within the hour, Emily had been tested and confirmed as a carrier of the same genetic variant. Unlike Kira, she wasn't pregnant, making her the ideal donor for the experimental protocol. As Dr. Patel supervised the collection of her blood and bone marrow samples, Martha and Daniel waited anxiously outside the procedure room. She didn't hesitate, Martha said softly. Not for a second. She's always been like that, Daniel replied with pride. Just like her sister, apparently. Martha leaned against her husband's shoulder, the tension of the past days finally giving way to tentative hope. Can you imagine if we had kept Kira? If we had raised both our daughters together? I think about it all the time, Daniel admitted. But maybe things happened the way they needed to. Kira became a doctor who specialized in exactly the condition that would eventually affect us. What are the odds of that happening if she had stayed with us in Millfield? Martha considered this. Do you think it's possible that some things are meant to be, even through such roundabout paths? I don't know, Daniel said honestly. But I do know that after 30 years, our daughter has come back into our lives. And now, instead of us saving her, she and Emily might save all of us. 3 days later, Theodore Johnson opened his eyes to find his daughter holding his hand. Behind her stood Regina, his wife of 35 years, who had barely left his side during his hospitalization. You gave us quite a scare, Regina said, tears of relief in her eyes. What happened? Theodore asked weakly. The experimental protocol worked, Kira explained, her professional tone belied by the emotion in her eyes. Your kidney function is improving steadily. How? Theodore managed. Kira hesitated, then decided her father deserved the full truth. It's complicated, Dad. There's someone I need you to meet. Actually, several people. When Martha, Daniel, and Emily entered the room, Kira made the introductions. Dad, this is Emily Winters, my half-sister. Her bone marrow donation is what's helping you recover. Theodore looked confused. Half-sister. It's a long story, Kira said, smiling tiredly, one that spans 3 decades and involves surrogate pregnancies, hidden family connections, and a very rare genetic variant that led to kidney failure in 3 separate people. And led to you finding your biological father, Regina added softly. Theodore's gaze moved to Daniel. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You're Kira's father, her biological father. Daniel nodded. I only learned it myself a few days ago. And Martha carried Kira as a surrogate for her best friend, Regina explained to her husband, a friend who turns out might have been her half-sister or cousin. Theodore processed this information slowly, then looked at Kira. So, you have two fathers and two mothers, in a way. Kira acknowledged, I'm still figuring it all out. We all are, Martha added. 2 weeks later, the extended family gathered in the hospital garden. Theodore, Martha, and Daniel sat together on a bench, all three showing remarkable improvement. Emily and Kira walked the garden paths nearby, engaged in animated conversation as they got to know each other. Michael, Kira's husband, watched them with amused affection, still adjusting to the sudden expansion of their family circle. Have you thought about what you'll name the baby? Emily asked her newfound sister. Kira smiled, her hand resting on her still flat abdomen. If it's a girl, we're thinking of Yvette Martha, to honor both my mothers. Nearby, Martha overheard and wiped away a tear. Theodore turned to Daniel. So, does this make us co-fathers-in-law or something? Daniel laughed. I have no idea what the proper term is. Family trees aren't supposed to be this complicated. Maybe not, Regina said, joining them, but family isn't just about biology or simple connections. It's about love and choices. As the afternoon sun bathed them in golden light, Martha watched her two daughters together, the one she had carried but not raised, and the one she had both carried and raised. Different paths, different lives, yet connected by blood and now by choice. We should take a picture, Martha suggested, our first family photo with everyone together. As they gathered for the photograph, Martha felt a sense of completion she had never expected to experience. 30 years ago, she had made the painful decision to give away a child she had carried, believing it was best for everyone. Now, through an extraordinary sequence of events, a shared genetic condition, a medical crisis, and the revelation of hidden family connections, that child had returned to them, not just as a daughter, but as a healer. The circle had closed. The family was complete, and 3 lives had been saved in the process. Michael held up the camera. Everyone say, family. As they smiled for the photograph, their voices joined in unison, family. If you've made it this far, thank you. This story wasn't just about kidneys or genetics. It was about redemption, courage, and family. I hope it moved you the way it moved me. If it did, consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.